What I'm going to do today, I'm going to cover a couple things that are not covered in the text when you receive the textbook, the sort of publication from Palgrave, because I didn't have time to cover the theoretical part of my chapter. It reads like a history chapter, but I'm a political scientist, so I need to give a little bit of a political science background as to where I'm coming from. This chapter that I wrote for this book is one of the three cases of my dissertation. My dissertation is focused on civil society and state discursive divide. Normally, in the last sort of 10, 15 years of the things Armenian Turkish, the state is seen as the main protagonist in denial. The state is seen as a sort of the party to denial and not the civil society. So denial is a state problem, is said. State is the main agency for genocide denial, and the prevalent discourse in the civil society is such that people observe a change within the civil society. So in that sense, I'm going to little bit disagree with Ferda on his perception of Agos, because I don't think that it's post-racial in a way. But I'll come back to that as to why. So in that same perception is, despite the fact that there's no state or there's no change in institutional mentality of the state has been seen as a post-genocidal state, which I also disagree. I think it's still genocidal. If you're gonna perceive denial as a stage of genocide, then we cannot necessarily call this post-genocidal. Post-genocide only means maybe temporal, but not necessarily theoretically speaking. So to what extent this argument holds is the focus of my dissertation. I say that civil society is where more sophisticated forms of denial and more sophisticated form of race discourse has been instrumentalized, produced, and in a way normalized within the discourse. Civil society is, most of the civil society actors, they themselves do not necessarily come from a very solid background on civil rights, despite the fact that they obviously are for rights. But just as the number and the frequency of encounters between Turks and Armenians have increased. Yes, there are a lot of television programs. Ferda is right. It's like 3-4 programs every week. But how is also important. In other words, how these issues are talked about is also important. And I don't think that part is addressed as much as, the actual frequency part is addressed. So my method for the thesis normally, and for this chapter as well, it's thick description. It's a very eclectic thesis. Every chapter has a different sort of methodological take, but this one is thick description, discourse analysis, and cross-comparative history between Germany and Turkey, which I didn't do like in the book because I didn't have time and space. I'm going to jump over this, but basically within the state civil society debate, civil society has seen as separate from the state, whereas there are other new sort of forms of thinking, mainly associated by Bourdieu, but also Migdal, about the boundaries of civil society, as to where civil society starts, where the state ends, And obviously, since this is a very contentious and very very antagonistic field in a way, there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of fight over which starts where. And in most cases, the state has seen this gigantic, consistent body, as this powerful image of a clearly bounded, unified organization. But also the state is the practices of a heap of loosely connected parts or fragments, where, obviously civil society, some part of the discourse that is produced in the civil society falls in this fragmented sort of field. Jumping over again very quickly. So according to Migdal, because I sort of, I kind of see his, or take his theoretical framework as mine. There are 3 levels of social control: compliance, participation, and legitimacy. Compliance is which is how a population responds to state demands. Participation is leaders organize the population for specialized tasks through institutions. And legitimacy, the acceptance of symbolic order associated with the idea of state as people's own system of meaning, where the center-periphery model presented this idea. So the state and society model, which does not necessarily see these two spheres separate from each other, together, that the idea that the state acts with the will and support of the periphery society. So in other words, they're not necessarily totally separated. So this is the reason why I don't see the civil societal discourse being completely radically different than the state discourse. If anything, it's a much more governmentalized version of it. So in other words, there are two levels of governmentality when it comes to minorities. One is the state, I mean, it's the institutions, it's the legal framework, etc. And the second one is the intellectuals of the dominant party. They also govern the minorities. And then what, for example, Ferda is telling us, the story that he tells, is a perfect story of governance in the sense that he presents Agos as being our only representative as a positive thing, whereas as a Turkish Armenian, I see this as a negative thing because the Turkish Armenian voice has been reduced to this one token institutions, one token sort of set of mind, whereas the Turkish Armenian community is a vibrant community. So just as we do not associate or see the African American community through the eyes of MLK or through the eyes of Malcolm X, same thing is true for Turkish Armenians. So Turkish Armenian voice is muffled in between. It's only reduced to one token sort of voice, which is a good thing for a number of reasons, but it's a bad thing, for other reasons. So, so that is being completely lost in the discussion. It's not there. And I see I'm the token Armenian for this session. Token Turkish Armenian, actually. You should have invited more. Anyway, okay. So this is ballpark, very quick overview of the theoretical part of my theoretical idea for the three cases. So one case is this. The other case is the apology of Turkish intellectuals, and the third case is about the tokenization of Hrant Dink vis-a-vis sort of within the framework of contra-diaspora, because the first 10 years of Hrant Dink's sort of discourse has not necessarily been one of representativeness alone, but representativeness in a particular form which was contra-diaspora, against diaspora. This is the good Armenian. This is how Armenians should speak. Okay, so and I don't think that this was post-race at all. This was like within the same race framework. When it comes to Turkish politics, the racism issue displays two distinct sort of interlinked but two distinct lines. One is towards the minorities. The other one is towards the Islamists of Turkey, because there's also a social racism component towards the Islamists by the mainstream intellectuals, by the mainstream secularist intellectuals. But it's a long debate. But I just, am throwing this out so that you understand it's not just directed against minorities or towards minorities. Okay. For those of you who are not conversant into Turkish politics, in order for you to be able to understand what I'm talking about in terms of the party of this monument discussion, I just made a little sort of very quick cheat notes here about the parties. AKP is the ruling party. It's center-right, populist, Muslim ruling party. Former PM and contemporary president and contemporary, right now, the current prime minister are from the same party, Erdogan and Davutoğlu. Davutoğlu was the Minister of Foreign Affairs when this monument was demolished. And there's the CHP, which is Republican People's Party, center-right. Despite the fact that they are a member of the Socialist International, they're really a party on the right. They're not necessarily on the left. They fancy themselves as social democrat, but when it comes to Kurdish issue, when it comes to minority issue, it's like they're completely on the right of the political spectrum. We have MHP, which is the far-right Nationalist Action Party, which was founded by former Colonel Alparslan Türkeş. Alparslan Türkeş is the name behind the 1960 coup d'etat, and also he's the name behind the Grey Wolf organization, which was the main armed organization during 60s, 70s, and part 80s on the streets fighting the left armed organizations. And we have İşçi Partisi, which is Doğu Perinçek's party. This is the party that is most famous among the prosecutors here. It's a small fringe party. It's supposedly a left party because it's a labor party after all, but it's not. It's a national socialist, and that sort of rank. Fringe, but very influential with deep state connections to the extent that he is the founder and one of the sort of members of Talat Pasha Committee. You wouldn't believe this, but the theater art establishment partially are from this, are supportive of the same party. And also, the sculptor of the monument that I'm going to talk about is also a supporter and a very ardent sort of follower Doğu Perinçek. At one instance in 2011, right before the elections, he was at Ulusal Kanal. Mehmet Aksoy, the sculptor, he was at Ulusal Kanal. He said that Doğu Perinçek is our hero. Who else but him, protected our rights in Switzerland? So there you go. But anyway, and we have also BDP, HDP right now, which is the Kurdish party. But the reason why it's not here, because Kurdish party did not necessarily have a main input during these talks. And we also have the Hizmet movement, which you should be aware of, the Fethullah Gülen movement, which were the sort of co-authors of AKP's 12-year policy, but their road sort of diverted on, I shouldn't say 12, it's 8 really. Their road diverted with the Kurdish sort of peace process starting the Oslo talks in 2010. They had divergent ideas about how the peace process should go, and eventually they sort of collapsed, and they're against each other. But they didn't have any sort of, they did not necessarily have a position on this. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit, because there are two kinds of history. There is the history of actual monument, and there's the history of the demolishing of the monument, which are two distinct histories. The actual monument, I'm going to talk about it later, so I'm going a little bit backwards. So the annals of Turkish-Armenian rapprochement, the reconciliation, initiative, and dialogue marked 8 January 2011 as the day when Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan called the Monument of Humanity by Mehmet Aksoy in Kars a freak, protested that it overshadowed a nearby Islamic shrine, and ordered its demolition. This position would be supported by Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu on aesthetic grounds. He said Kars has an architectural tradition inherited from the Ottomans and the Seljuks. This monument does not reflect that architecture. It does not befit this architectural aesthetics. Works in compliance with the architectural heritage of the region should be constructed. Sculptor Mehmet Aksoy, hailed by today's Zaman columnist Yavuz Baydar as a very well-known and deeply respected artist in EU circles, here are the keywords, offered that his work carries anti-war and friendship messages, and added, I depicted the situation of a person that is divided in two. This person will be himself again when these two pieces are reunited. I want to express this. You cannot immediately label this as a monstrosity. It's a shameful act and unjust. One should understand what it says first. Fast forward the tape to 2 days ago, March 3rd. Mehmet Aksoy, the sculptor of the monument, had sued then Prime Minister Erdogan for his calling this monument freak, and the court decided that Erdogan has to pay a fine of 10,000 Turkish lira, which amounts to $4,500. 2 days ago, so Erdogan was fined for uttering the word ucube, the freak, and then asked what he's going to do with the money. The sculptor responded, oh, I'm going to party with my friends. So this sculptor, I'm going to party for Nuruz with my friends. So he's going to use this monument money, whatever, to party with his friends. Okay, actually, Mehmet Aksoy, I should give him a credit. He was correct in one point, his last point. He said, one should understand what it says first before being against the monument, right? He was right in that before taking a pro-composition, one should have understood what the monument itself meant, or even how the history, the concept, and construction of the monument evolved in the context of domestic Turkish politics, or the larger Turkish-Armenian relationship. This was hardly the case for either the Turkish, or for that matter, Armenian press. Even though it was at times referred to as a monument for peace between Turkey and Armenia, by the time it was demolished in the spring of 2011, Armenians at large, and Armenia in particular, were completely erased from the language of pro-monument demonstration news and analysis. There are a couple of radical pieces, newspaper pieces. For example, this one that is footnoted in the chapter is particularly interesting since it reported a pro-monument demonstration on all days, 23 April 2011, to protect both the monument and the values of the Republic with CHP, out of all parties, which is the Republican People's Party. Politicians on National Sovereignty and Children's Day, 1 day before April 24, with absolutely no mention of Armenians. The same trend can be seen in another radical piece where there's no mention of Armenians in a news item on a pro-monument panel. So the monument itself became something else during the course of events. It became something. It became a sort of a tool, an artifact where the secularists who have an axe to grind with AKP for other reasons have used this, like contra AKP. Okay, so although the parties to the discussion became divided among conservative nationalist hawks who were against the statute and supposedly non-nationalist progressive doves who wholeheartedly embraced both the statute's concept and its implementation. But there were no wide-scale public deliberation, either about the decision-making process or about the concept itself or about its execution. None of it was discussed. I just want you to compare briefly this, for example, with the construction of the Berlin Monument, which even the debating of the monument's idea, the concept, took sometime between 15 years before the monument. And despite the fact that Erdogan had been hailed as a dictator, or because he interfered in the demolition of this, Helmut Kohl, who was at the chancellor at the time, 1996, he himself interfered and he vetoed, the project in 1996, and he didn't even let it, take ground, get out of the ground. So it's obviously expected that the chief executive can, interfere in this kind of, border boundary issue, because I don't think that this. Oh my God! I don't think that this monument is just a local monument, so to speak. Like, in other words, it does not necessarily concern Kars people. Obviously, it concerns Kars people. It also concerns people on the other side of the border, who by that time, they're clueless about what's going on within Turkish politics. But who cares? They think that the Turkish politics can be understood by progressive versus, the Islamist dichotomy, which is a silly dichotomy to begin with. But anyway, so this is a big issue for the Turkish nation in general. So, and it's expected that the executive is going to interfere somehow. Okay, I have 5 minutes to go. Okay, so you understood. I mean, I basically was able to, I guess, summarize this part. So, but this idea of a monument is nothing of a novelty within Turkish state or Turkish sort of, I should say, since Ottoman times. We have several monuments, about this issue. We have at least 3 monuments right now. The first one is something that is completely forgotten. So this is from. This is a Agos piece from 2001. This is something called Hushardzan Abril Dasnimegi, which is basically April 11 monument, which is it's within a book, page 128 of a book about the monument. And where this monument is, this is a monument that was supposedly built in Istanbul, at least was there until 1919, but we don't know where it is. But the last place that this monument could be is the Gezi Park, which was the park for demonstrations and here and now in 2013, something that was, again, also erased in memory by, again, the liberals. The liberals did not make this as part of their, regular discourse. But anyway, so this is the first monument that is, this has disappeared from the face of Earth. And this is the second monument, not necessarily commemorating Armenian genocide, so to speak, but commemorating the genocide that Armenians committed against Turks. So this is in Kars as well, in Iğdır. And I want you to see the pictures back to back. This is, by the way, 45 meters tall, and it's like, obviously, these are swords and whatnot. It signifies peace and whatnot. So, and then look at this. This is from Iğdır municipality. Again, I think there's a reverberation of the of Armenian obsession with the mountain, and then this. By the way, this is a monument and a museum. There's a museum underneath the monument commemorating the atrocities that Armenians committed against Turks. So, the third time that this idea of monument has been voiced is not necessarily from the left or liberal quarters, as one would expect, but from the least expected corner of Turkish politics, which is Alparslan Türkeş, the National Action Party, right about the time when he was communicating with Levon Petrosyan in 1993. Basically, what he said, he was behind the idea that we should have a commemorative monument at the border. He said the following. He said, "It is an indisputable fact that the Armenians who revolted against the Ottoman Empire and joined the Russian forces in the occupation of Eastern Anatolia in the First World War have committed a war crime, but nor does this constitute a pretext to overlook or justify the pain experienced by the other tens of thousands of Armenian civilians due to the deportation decision." So he said, what must be done is not at all complicated. Armenia should be considered the single legitimate interlocutor Turkey will negotiate the matter at the highest level in Yerevan without taking offense, while Armenians will feel relief in Ankara's acceptance of painful events. He believed that the problem could be solved with agreements on a jointly prepared declaration in a style appropriate to the sensitivity of the matter at hand, the simultaneous opening of borders, and the improvement of mutual relations in every area. For the time when his vision would be realized, he planned for a 1915 monument, this is Alparslan Turkesh, in the middle of the Turkish-Armenian border with the inscription in Armenian on the one side and in Turkish on the other side, same exact sentence, "We are sorry for the pain we have caused." So this kind of monument, which in a way, the monument of humanity also presupposes a kind of equality between the two structures, which I'm not going to delve into that discussion, but this kind of idea of parity has been put in place already by Alparslan Türkeş in the 1990s when he was talking to post-Levon Petrosyan talks. Alparslan Türkeş's interview is proof that what some elements of the Turkish left have touted as progress on their part is not really progress, considering the fact that their discourse overlaps with that of the ultra-rightist leader of a party with deep connections to the Turkish military bureaucratic apparatus. Türkeş was far from being absolute denialist, as most people do think he was. Usually denialism does not come that way anyway, anyhow. So Türkeş was able to accept the pain that Armenians have gone through, but again, he was not necessarily on the same page as to how we should, term all these pain. So, and there's another episode where this monument idea has been re-instrumentalized or reused in the political discourse. Why Ömer Taşpınar, who was from Brookings Institution at the time, he said right after the assassination of Hrant Dink, he said that we should have a some sort of a monument at the border. Like this is 4 days after the assassination, to appease Turkish Armenians and also to show Europeans our good intentions. So he was willing to use Hrant Dink's assassination in this respect. So this is the monument. Of course, you cannot get a sense of the size of the monument. This is this was supposed to be something at 40 meters high. Do you see those the bricks over there? They are the remnants of a military barracks, military emplacements from 1500s, which also have been used during the World War I at the Kars-bound border. So this is one of the reasons why the municipality did not let the municipal board did not want them to continue, because apparently they did not realize that it was on the placements, which is a historical sort of remnant. And you can see this is part of the again the same barracks, which is underneath this military barracks. So I have to, I guess, finish. But 2005 onwards, there were several news pieces about the monument itself, from the concept, which always shifted. The concept was, something vaguely about peace and brotherhood between Armenians and Turkey. But the sculptor said explicitly a couple of times that this monument, the two people facing each other, was a statement against two monuments, meaning against Iğdır and against Dzirnagaberd. So in other words, this monument, this peace monument, was equating in the sculptor's mind denial and genocide acceptance, or Dzirnagaberd and Iğdır monument. So this was against both. These are the claims by the municipal committee and the municipality over there about the demolition, the reason for the demolition. Number one, this was, despite the fact that the municipal commission passed this as a historical monument process, process, this was not necessarily built as such. It started to be built with a restaurant. So this was a very interesting issue of thanatourism, where from the beginning they wanted to build a restaurant, a lift, and etc. So over the years, they negotiated to take down or not to start the lift and the restaurant and whatnot. So MHP, Nationalist Action Party, sued the sculptor 4 times in the course of 5 years or 6 years, and they were able to stop the demolition. And MHP later said that actually Erdogan stole their victory because MHP was against this for a number of reasons. First of all, they said that this is over the sort of the military barracks. Second, that it is higher than Hassan Harakani's tomb. Hassan Harakani is a Sufi sort of leader of Naqshbandi origin, so it's a big thing within the Islamic sort of a world of meaning. And number 3, that there was a confusion since the beginning of the time of the project, what the monument meant, because MHP was not sure what the monument meant, and they thought that the monument means, listen to this, the hugging of Eastern and Western Armenia, and that's why they were against it. So all sorts of crazy ideas about what the monument meant, whereas the monument was completely something else. So in the chapter, I deal with all these issues of representation, non-existence of deliberation, and not necessarily, I mean, these are the issues absent from the discussion, and not necessarily absent from not necessarily just from an Armenian perspective, so to speak, but it is not, let's say the demolition process was undemocratic, but the initiation, the conception of the project was undemocratic as well. So they just, there was no open competition for the monument. There was no debate with Kars people themselves. There was no debate with Yerevan people whether they wanted to see this monstrosity every day, waking up, on the border. I would be very deranged, like I would be very disturbed seeing this every day. I hated it from the beginning. But none of it is within the discussion. So none of this is within the discussion. No deliberation whatsoever. I mean, this democratic authoritarian binary does not make sense at all if you really look deep down what was going on the field itself. And a debate on aesthetics was completely not there. As a matter of fact, it's very interesting for me, for my own reading, is that Davutoğlu is the only person who brings about, albeit, I mean, during the process of deconstruction, demolition of the monument, something about city silhouette, the city silhouette is important. And it's very interesting that the establishment, the sort of art establishment, who fancies themselves above Islamists all the time, none of them had even uttered one iota of word about what this monument means, aesthetically speaking, which I briefly sort of engaged that discussion in the chapter. So I don't know how much you're seeing this, because I'm not sure. But this is a table that I did about deliberative quality and of several monuments. One of them is Çanakkale, the Dardanel monument. The other one is Armenian Genocide monument, Zizernagabert, in terms of its resources, in terms of its competition, whether it's open competition or not, who founded, etc., the process, and also the Iğdır monument, the Monument of Humanity, and Çamlıca Mosque, which was a big debate in Turkey. The reason why I included Çamlıca Mosque in this, because of its monumentality, because it's a monument, it's a mosque, but it's also a monument. So the worst in all these is Monument of Humanity in terms of its deliberative quality at the start of the project. No deliberation whatsoever. And it's very murky who funded what. This is where I end. For those of you who may not necessarily grasp what it means for Mehmet Aksoy to be the supporter of Doğu Perinçek. Moreover, not that we didn't know who Mehmet Aksoy was. Mehmet Aksoy is associated with the Ulusal Kanal and İşçi Partisi and whatnot. And he's not necessarily a victim of the AKP regime as was ostensibly presented, during the course of events. As a matter of fact, after the demolition of this project, Mehmet Aksoy built the biggest monument in Turkish history for the Turkish Air Forces, and this was like a crazy sum of money. I think it was $25 million or something like that. He was hardly a victim of the AKP regime as he was presented in the EU, circles or in the European press and whatnot. So, all in all I want to say is that this this was a very complicated process where the Turkish parties to the discussion, they completely at some point forgot that this was about Armenians, and then this turned into a political debate between the two sides, two antagonistic sides of the Turkish political spectrum, just as everything else is. So just as Armenians have been erased from history, they also have been erased from the contemporary discussion of a monument that was supposedly was done for them, or was addressing them. Thank you.